Okay. We will call the meeting of the Cincinnati Board of Park Commissioners to order. It's 9:02, and I am, for those watching on television or on your laptops, I am removing my mask today. I'm fully vaccinated, and we do not have public here in the room with us. We hope to have you back soon, but each of the commissioners is free to either wear a mask, or you're welcome to wear a mask, or to not wear a mask, as you so desire.
Is a chin diaper okay?
A chin diaper is fine, Brad.
Okay, thanks.
But I want to welcome all of the commissioners. I want to note for the record that we are in, everyone is present and accounted for. I especially want to welcome our Commissioner Molly North, who has been with us for several months, but the first time that she's able to join us and be here together. So welcome, and thank you to all of you who are joining us via our Zoom feed. First thing today, we have an order of business. I just want to ask if there's any additions or modifications to the agenda. I might say that after in old business and item C, I'll just give a brief update on where we are with ARP funding. And then also as a letter D, ask if there's any comments on any of the reports that have been included in the monthly package. Do any of the other commissioners or staff have a change that they'd like to make on the agenda?
President Getz, on behalf of staff, we would like to request the removal of agenda item 2B under new business, which is the Cincinnati Park Board Rule 25. Staff would like to take a slightly different approach and revisit and bring this back to the board at a future meeting date.
Without objection, we'll table number B and bring it back when staff is ready to bring it back to us.
Thank you.
Any other changes, updates? Okay, thank you. Well, the first item of business then is approval. I'm sorry.
The additions C and D, are they under old business?
Old business,
Okay.
yeah, just brief updates on the ARP funding. And then just to open if any of the commissioners have questions or comments on the monthly reports that have been distributed.
Thank you.
So first order of business is approval of our April 15, 2021 minutes. Are there any changes or additions or corrections? Hearing none, can I have a motion for Mr. Linder, Ms. Castellini? All of those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I will notice that since we are all here in together, and that I will say we will do all votes today as a voice vote, unless any of you would like to request a poll, and then we will take the poll of the commissioners. But since we're all here in person, our votes can be recorded that way. So having said that, I believe I heard all those in favor of the minutes. Any opposed? The minutes are approved unanimously. Our next order of business is new business, and we will, Kara, if you'd like to introduce this item.
Yes, so the first item, Mr. Sheckman, our division manager from Planning and Design, will walk us through, is the concept design for Johnston Park. Mr. Sheckman will inform us of where we are today and what we're asking of the board.
Okay, thank you and good morning. I think Mary is going to screen share, and you've all seen the report, which is a kind of lengthy plan. And I'm just going to hit some of the highlights of the plan. So if Mary, can you pull up the images? There we go. And so the plan, again, it's a concept plan. We're asking for your approval. We've been guided through this by a steering committee of stakeholders. And the stakeholders included our newest neighbor, the Cincinnati Ballet, and Commissioner Thomas was also represented on the committee. Next slide, please. So of course, we started with a number of objectives that we shared with the steering committee. Things like supporting the neighborhood needs. We know that the site is and can be a great gateway to the Walnut Hills neighborhood and to Mount Adams. Certainly integrating the site with the Cincinnati Ballet site to use environmental design principles, and certainly to have an accessible park. Next slide. Of course, the site from Elsinore at the south up to the Cincinnati Ballet site on the north, I-71 to our west, and Gilbert to the east. Next slide. And these are all excerpts from the plan. Certainly, we've looked at the adjacencies, and a major point of the project is one of linkage, connecting the new Johnson Park to Eden Park, connecting to the art climb, connecting to the Elsinore Stairs, and all the great cultural assets in Eden Park. Next slide. Just a few shots of existing conditions and a great opportunity. The picture in the center is an old decommissioned railroad trestle that runs from the south end, the southwest end of the park toward downtown. So more about that later. Next slide. We looked at and will be informed by the history of the site. And before I-71, there were recreation areas here. And of course, there's the great Baldwin Piano Factory just to our north, the former factory. Next slide. So I went through the standard kind of process to share with the stakeholders, to reach out and determine what are the program for the site, making the site a connective link, as I mentioned before, and an interactive place, and a place that recognizes its history. Next slide. One of the things we did was reach out to the residents of the Baldwin complex, and we got something close to 100 responses. And you see some of them here, and by far what people were most interested in was to have a place to sit, to have a place to walk, and to gather, and to have a safe place. Next slide. And so this is the concept, and reading from left to right or from south to north, the gateway, a viewing place, and we want to have landscape, and there's currently kind of a scruffy landscape up against I-71. So we want to enhance that landscape, but also have some viewing places or view sheds to look out on the highway and not really totally pretend that it's not there. You see the rail trestle here on a diagonal leading to a central plaza with a lot of flexibility. Again, the buffer, and then an open lawn area where it opens up to the Cincinnati Ballet building, and a green edge along Gilbert. Next slide. And so just a couple of renderings, and it says gateway sign, but that's where it would say Johnson Park, or if we were going to rename it, that would be the name of the site. Next slide. And just a view of the center plaza. And the idea here is that the landscape is mounted up on the side, and there would be low walls that at some times would be curbs, at other times would be seat walls, and can also support, as you're seeing in this rendering, interpretive signs. Next slide. And a view taken from a rendering as if you're looking from the second floor of the ballet building looking toward downtown. And you see the lawn area in the foreground. Next slide. And a view of the railroad trestle. Again, these are preliminary kinds of concepts, but the idea is to convert this obviously into a pedestrian space. It connects the Johnson Park and the Eden Park area in Walnut Hills with a pedestrian link toward downtown and Pendleton. And there's a set of stairs just across Reading Road at the opposite end of the trestle that leads people up into Mount Auburn. So it's a great connective tissue. The sides here that are illustrated show that there's an opportunity for interpretive signs at the lower area, and then we have to design some protective fencing as you see on all overpasses over interstate highways. Next slide. And some of the design inspiration, I've talked about the history of the site, and an obvious historic association is with Baldwin Piano Factory. And conceptually, and something we'll see further as we get into design development, are the paving patterns and the materials that are chosen in the park, and a suggestion that these might reflect some of the spirit of the inside of a piano, for example. Next slide. Now we get to the money. So the base park at this point, we're looking at $1.2 to $1.5 million to build what we're seeing here. The next slide. We've looked at then the costs separately for the trestle. And you see those numbers here. Potential for a shade pavilion. And then whether we pay for it at some point or the city does, we're looking to narrow the pedestrian crossing of Gilbert Avenue. So you're seeing a number here for those intersection improvements. And this all then gets summed up, I believe, in the next slide, a line drawing of the site. Yes, so you see the site here, the property lines, the indication of the landscaping, you see the trestle, and you see the plazas. So that's a very quick and brief highlight of what the plan contains and some of what generated the plan. I know the design team believe we may have several members of the steering committee with us as well. Thank you.
So Steve, what are you asking, or Kara, what is the board being asked to do today?
So
Right now.
Thank you, Steve. The request today is that because the steering committee has completed its work to create a conceptual design, to put that in front of the commissioners today and request your approval. A lot of great work has been done. Commissioner Thomas serving on that committee and many of the steering committee members who are represented on the call today. The work that they've done is beautiful, and it will allow us to, your approval today will allow us then to revisit as a group, as a commission, where we would like to go from here. Today is just a request for approval of conceptual design.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for the process, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I was only going to add that obviously there's a lot more design work and conversations beyond this. When we put the funding together, there is the design development stage where we really dig into the materials and detailing of the design, and of course then to come up with a funding plan. So those will be the next steps.
Okay. So for clarity, what we're being asked today is to identify, are we in approval of conceptual designs that we've seen today, which would then allow staff working with the committee to move forward with estimating a little bit more detailed design work. And then that will come back to us. This is not approval of the project, but approval in stages here. So this will approve the design and concept. So with that, I'd like to open first to Commissioner Thomas, who is part of the committee. Do you have any thoughts, comments?
Well, I would just like to say, I think this was an incredibly productive experience for me, and a lot of engagement that I think is important as we do these kinds of projects. There was input from the various communities that will be directly impacted. There was a lot of back and forth in terms of what the design focus would be and what the objective and what we wanted to accomplish with this space. And I think we've come to a very nice presentation for that area as a gateway up into Eden Park and the rest of the area. So I commend this committee for some very good work. The one question that I did have about the report as I read it, I think it's extremely important to make sure that the communities that are directly impacted are represented. And I think that we have done that. But as I looked at the final report here, it mentions that Walnut Hills, this has been before the Walnut Hills Community Council, but I was wondering about Mount Adams. because I know they were involved early on, and I wanted to make sure our records reflect that we've engaged with them and that they've seen this final design.
Yeah, there were representatives, active representatives from both of those communities. I also made a presentation to the Walnut Hills Community Council. Mount Adams hasn't taken any official position as far as I know, but they have been involved from the get-go.
I think it'll be important for us to capture their approval of whatever we have so that we won't get down the road and we have people coming in and say, we didn't know about it and what is all this about? And so because they had been involved early on, I think our documents should reflect that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just have a couple of comments about the park. It's exciting. I love the design of it. You know, you mentioned you want this to be a destination. I really think it'll be important for us to have a partner that's dedicated to programming. If we want it to be a destination, we really need to bring alive these food trucks and performances. It's a disconnected parcel as it stands now. While it's connected to Baldwin, it's separated by essentially a freeway. So I think it's going to take some work to really bring people to that park and create that destination. The railroad's very exciting. I think that really turns the park into being useful for the community by connecting neighborhoods to downtown. So I hope that we'll very seriously look at ways to bring that second phase of the park to life sooner and not just make it, you know, a future item that is it could be, which we often forget about this.
If I may, Commissioner North, we've talked about this throughout the process, even before it began, to work with our partners, including the Cincinnati Ballet that plans to do outdoor performances at the north end of the park on their parking lot / performance venue. And also a member of the committee was Cameron Kitchen, the director of the Art Museum, and talked about potential for art installations, whether they be permanent or temporary. So we're certainly very interested in programming the space.
That's great.
Any other comments, input?
I just love the history. It was very well done.
It's well thought out.
Mhm.
That's what I was also drawn to the idea of commemorative plaques or signage that does reflect the history of that location. I had a question, Steve, sort of along the line of Commissioner North, since it will be a destination. What's your thought on parking? Where will parking be for people coming to this park?
Well, for one thing, we expect, because of the pedestrian linkages, that we have good foot traffic from the people who live right next door, from Mount Adams, from the Pendleton area. The only parking would be, since the ballet is probably going to be using their parking, and the Baldwin parking is accessible, but I don't know how much of that would be available to the public. There is a long stretch of Gilbert that has parking on both sides of the street. So essentially it would be on-street parking.
Okay. Another part of your design that we saw in here that is ancillary to this park itself is the connection for bike trail to the Crown Network. And I think that's extremely exciting. And I love the idea that we're planning that along with the concept for the park itself. So I appreciate that input. The other point that I'll make to the commissioners is that this is yet another project that's being brought to us. And I know that in coming meetings, I think it will be good for us to evaluate all of the projects that are on the table for us and provide input as far as priorities, because there's a lot of work being done here, and I want to make sure that the Park Commission Board has an opportunity to weigh in as far as dedication of resources and where this project might fit in with all the other projects that we have on the table. So with that, do we, what is do I have a motion related to the approval? Staff has requested that we approve the design and concept. Do we have a motion?
Make a motion.
So moved by Brad.
Second.
Second by Susie. Any further discussion on the motion on the floor to approve in concept the design that's been presented today? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say nay. The motion has been carried unanimously. Thank you, Steve, and thank you to the committee.
Thank you.
As Commissioner Castellini said, this was an excellent product that you gave to us. It really fleshed out the project and your thoughts and concepts for design. So thank you very much for that.
I would like to recommend that this gets sent on to the city manager's office.
Okay.
So noted. I might back up here since I'm a rookie at leading these meetings. I did miss, and I know Mary tried to get my attention and I rudely ignored her. I wanted to acknowledge that we did have some public comments that came in advance of this meeting. Those comments, we had a couple specifically, one from Cynthia Duvall and one from Liv Birkenhauer, who is the president of the Cincinnati Off-Road Alliance. Those comments have been sent and distributed to each of the commissioners and will be made part of the minutes of this meeting. So thank you. And again, we look forward to the time that we have the public here with us. So now we'll move on to the next item. Kara, would like to introduce, it's a Cincinnati Zoo issue.
Thank you very much, commissioners. Today you have before you an opportunity to review an update to the zoo's master plan and a request to convert public land to right-of-way. Mr. Scheckman, our division manager for planning and design, will take us through this process. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, sure. And just in a moment, I know members of the zoo team, probably kicked off by Thane Maynard, the director of the zoo, will talk a little bit about the master plan and the changes to the plan. And Mary, I think there's just 2 drawings to share here. So just quick background, the zoo, most of the zoo grounds are owned by the park board. We've got a long-term lease with the zoo. I think it goes to the year 2065 at this point. And under the terms of the lease, any permanent physical changes on the zoo grounds need to be reviewed and approved by the park board. I think it's been several years since the board, and probably none of the current commissioners were on at the time, last approved the zoo master plan. So there are some changes to the plan and we were being asked to approve those. In particular, there's some changes at the southwest corner of the zoo at Erkenbrecher and Vine. If Mary can just pull up that site plan real quick. And what's happening here is that the park board owns a small parking lot at the corner of Erkenbrecher and Vine. It's surrounded by other parking lots, all owned by the zoo. And in order to accommodate some future improvements that are actually about to take place, that will consolidate the parking lots and build a new pedestrian bridge to cross Erkenbrecher, a part of the land, let's just go right to the parking lot site. So a small sliver of the parking lot that the city owns is going to be taken for right-of-way. So this is a picture of the intersection. To the left is Erkenbrecher and the foreground's Vine. Here you see the proposed pedestrian bridge across Erkenbrecher. And one more slide, Mary. And that narrow strip is what's needed for right-of-way. So beyond the gray area, the hatched area you see is also going to be right-of-way, but that's going to be taken from zoo property. So you're being asked today to approve the conversion of this small strip of the parking lot of parkland for right-of-way for these zoo improvements. Also, at a future date, it may be at one of the next couple of board meetings, in order to accommodate the bridge, part of the bridge supports appear to be on park board property. So we will probably be coming to you in the future with an easement to allow for those abutments. And with that, I'll turn it over to Thane. I think you're probably the next speaker to just talk a little bit about what changes you've done to the master plan that includes the area I just described. Thane.
Steve, thanks, and thanks to everybody for having us here today. There are a number of us from the zoo. Dave Jenneke, our COO, Mark Fisher, who's Vice President for Planning and Sustainability and a civil engineer, Dean Violetta, who's our planner and architect, and Jeff Kern, who's our engineer. And they'll be able to answer real specific questions. But first off, this should be said, we haven't been in front of you since the pandemic. I think every family in town, mine included, discovered new parks in the Cincinnati park system because everybody spent last year outside. We found places like Caldwell Nature Preserve and others, and I thought, this is phenomenal. And of course, it's a tribute to parks are more important to people today than ever in such a crowded world. So thanks for everything you're doing, no kidding. And of course, our partnership goes back a long, long time. The zoo is on park board land, and it's been a great relationship. So here's to all that. The overarching part of how the zoo has succeeded over the last 15 years has to do with increased parking. By moving the cars out of the zoo, it's allowed us to reclaim land that was originally for animals. Of course, when the zoo was founded in 1873, there weren't any parking lots. So that's been heartening and allowed us to have things like Baby Fiona and a great big pool of rainwater that used to be in the parking lot. And we've got other big moves coming as well, getting the cars out of our back lot so we can create a single 5-acre yard just for elephants. But in doing that, we've had to purchase land near the zoo and work hard to figure out how to make that work. We've worked very closely with our neighbors, been very transparent with our neighbors in Avondale and Corryville and Clifton, what we're doing, and have gotten a lot of approval from all 3 of those community groups, as well as the city's zoning committee and the city council. But this part of the land, as Steve said in question, actually is park board land, so it does require your approval. The significance of solving the parking solution is vital to the zoo's success. We, over the years, have grown to be the #1 attraction in the city of Cincinnati, as well as the #1 attraction in Hamilton County. And you can imagine when you do that right in the core of the city, it creates parking trouble. In fact, prior to the pandemic, when we were closed a year ago, our top 3 complaints were parking, parking, and parking. And now that things are easing up with mask mandates, et cetera, our attendance is growing again, and we're still facing that pressure point. So building this larger parking lot is important to us, no doubt. I will mention a big part of the plan is a footbridge across Erkenbrecher. That's an important public safety move. You may remember in 2016, a child was struck while leaving the zoo, walking across Vine Street, and killed. The Cincinnati police were there, they were running the lights, everything was safe, there were crosswalks, there were lights, but a drug driver ran through a light and killed a 3-year-old child. So having another bridge will keep folks off the street and keep us all safe. It also will be a benefit to local residents, both the parking and the bridge, to make traffic work more easily. It's a very busy part of town with Cincinnati Children's Hospital and UC Health, our closest neighbors. So the whole thing's a win-win, no doubt, and I appreciate everybody's support. If you have specific questions about that easement, I know that the folks who came here from the zoo with me know the answers better than I do.
Thank you, Thane. I just want to say, first of all, that it is an exceptional relationship with Cincinnati Zoo and the Cincinnati Parks. And as a neighbor of the park over in the Clifton area, I just am very impressed with the way that you do take the public into consideration, and then also the zoo's emphasis on environmental issues and the parking that you do have with the solar panels and the safety that you have, and your approach to living building projects within the zoo. It's very commendable. So we appreciate you, and thanks for the presentation. I'd like to open up any questions for Thane related to this easement.
I have, not so much, I'm just curious about attachment E thing. And it says proposed parking garage. Are you guys gonna build a garage?
Well, you know, that was an earlier plan and it was too rich for our blood.
That's what I thought I heard. Okay.
When the pandemic hit, we really took a hard look at all of the operations here at the zoo And like many businesses, we realized we had really been spoiled because every year things grew year on, 1 year after another. But with a real in-depth look, which is from the team that's here with me today from the zoo, really looking at the engineering of it, the long-term maintenance of it, et cetera, man, a parking garage is insanely expensive because you don't just need to spend, call it $35 million to build one, but unlike an asphalt lot, it requires a lot of manpower to run it, maintenance to keep it up, and setting aside money for significant ongoing maintenance. And it just didn't pencil out for us. As we all know, often parking garages, whether they're down by the river or they're over by the FC Stadium, are built with county funds or city funds or things like that because they're just so darn expensive. So instead, what we're doing is increasing our surface parking, basically to create over time a lot as big on the southeast side of Vine and Erkenbrecher as we have on the west side of Vine Street, which would allow us to have over 2,000 parking spaces in that area.
Thanks, appreciate the explanation.
Any other comments, questions? Well, then I think what we have before us is a request by staff with the approval of the zoo board that we grant a right-of-way easement. Is that correct?
Like
It's-
so that you as the park commissioners have a formal role to play, a responsibility to consider the master plan changes that have been presented by the zoo. That's first and foremost. And then the second, in order for them to act upon that, there would need to be an approval of the park board to convey currently owned parkland to right of way.
Okay,
So it's not an easement, it's transferring land.
okay. For clarity, though, I think all we heard today, and we've approved some changes to the master plan pre-pandemic. I remember since I've been on the board, we have some of the exciting changes that you're making already in the zoo. You had a full presentation to us. Thane, are you the only change that I heard today as far as master plan was theoretically the addition of a bridge, a walkway bridge, and also this expansion of the parking. Is that correct?
It is. The last time we presented to you all, we still had the garage concept in there. We have backed away from that for financial reasons, and this is the solution to it. The other areas that we have improved since that time and are improving, such as down the road, our great big elephant trek facility, those are still as we presented.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, then I'll look for a motion, entertain a motion to approve conveyance of some park property for right-of-way, and in concept approving the zoo's designs on putting a walkway bridge at some point across, I believe it's Erkenbrecher, to facilitate some foot traffic. Thank you. Commissioner North moved and Commissioner Castellini second. Is there any other discussion about this? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion passes unanimously. So thank you for the presentation, Steve, and also the work being done by the Cincinnati Zoo. Thank you, Thane, and your
Thank you. Thank you all very
Thank
much.
you.
Thanks for everything you do. Everybody loves the Cincinnati parks.
Everybody loves the zoo.
Well, we're lucky. We're lucky. We're in the outdoor business this year. Yeah.
There's a lot of love going on here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item. Kara, you want to introduce infrastructure study for us?
Yeah, so we are extremely pleased today to bring you the final report of the infrastructure study that we spent the past year on. Mr. Sheckman will take us through the completion of that, and we're also joined today by Pat, who will be able to answer any questions for you. So Mr. Sheckman,
Yes, thank you again.
what we got here?
Okay, so it's, I don't know if anyone has printed it out. It's lots of pages. You've already seen the kind of report.
228 if I'm not, 200. I have not. I put one page.
It's a lot of paper. So you've already seen the core of the study, which is the infrastructure study, We know we're looking at something like $74 million worth of need. And a big chunk of that, 50 million, are really facilities in poor or fair condition. And of course, as we make our requests to council for funding and as we look at grant opportunity, we're focusing on those facilities. What's new here are two other components of the study that were always within the scope of work that have just now been completed. One is Crone, and the other is an update of the 2007 master plan costs. So on Crone, what the team did was several things. First, they looked at the building certainly to assess what the needs were now. They also looked at the building and interviewed staff and did research to test a program that goes way back to 1997 when we first proposed a major renovation and an expansion of Crone. And that expansion included things we just don't have today that so many other conservatories do have. Adequate visitor facilities, an auditorium, classrooms, an expanded gift shop, a cafe, restaurants, expanded collections, and all those things. And what the study found was the basic programs, the basic layout that was proposed back again in 1997, as we look at Crone today in the future, are still valid. What's changed, of course, are the costs. So the study found that to build, conceptually, to build what we've conceived of, that program would be $55 million in today's dollars. The study also looked at what are the immediate needs of the building and what are some of the other needs that would be accommodated when the building is expanded and renovated. And those needs are beyond $6 million. Rather than replace all the glass and do some of that work now, what our basic proposal here is to look to the future, that in 5 or 6 years, we'd be looking at having that major Crone expansion underway, and we would relook at all the needs and take care of them at that time. Another component of the Crone study was to do a couple of case studies looking at 2 other conservatories in the region. One is the Phipps Conservatory in Pittsburgh. The other is the Franklin Park Conservatory in Columbus. And as you look through the document, you can see that those are much bigger operations in terms of the services they offer. They're structured very differently, the size of the facility, and all the programs that they do. We still think it was interesting to look at that and to think about those kinds of things as we look to the future and what a future Crone might be, to actually get some lessons learned in how they operate, the technologies they use to operate, and again, the services and programs they offer. So that is what the Crone component is about. The master plan section was simply no more than looking at the master plan, and that dates again to 2007, and look at it in terms of saying, if we were to do all those things, and we're not saying that we would now, and of course some of them have been accomplished, what would that cost in today's dollars? And that number was over $170 million. I think it's $179 million. That includes a $55 million new Crone. It includes other major projects. It remains to be seen as we update the master plan, how many of those things we would still do. Of course, we wouldn't do any of them without starting over again, in the sense with brand new community engagement. Since it's so many years later, we have different people in those neighborhoods and different leadership. And of course, what the board's priorities are at the time. So very briefly, that's what the Crone study says and was meant to do, and that's what the master plan piece of it was. And of course, you're all familiar with the big kahuna here, the infrastructure study. So Pat Hogan was the lead of a team of engineers and architects and landscape architects from the firm of Branstad and Carroll to answer any questions. And today it's for your information, no other action in particular.
Thank you, Steve. Questions or comments for Steve?
Yes, Steve, the conservatories that you're comparing them to in Pittsburgh and Columbus, what was the footprint of their real estate, and how does that compare, and what they do and how that compares to what we have at Crone too? That's a lot of stuff that they got going on there, and I don't know if we have the space to jam all that in there at Crone.
Well, Pat, I don't know if you could pull that up. Within the study, there's actually a chart that compares the square footage of each of those to ours, the number of visitors, the length of stay, and all those things. Certainly, they have a bigger footprint. Maybe Pat can even tell you what that is. And what we had looked at in the 97 plan was to preserve the historic front of Crone, to add on in the back, to also have an underground addition. So many of those visitor services were below ground, where you come into the historic entry and then go below ground to those facilities, to remove the parking lots and replace the parking and expand the two main parts of the show houses and the tropical house onto the parking lot, build at the back, and by building up and in the back beyond the waterfall, to have conceptually a restaurant in Crone at the top of the waterfall that is entered from Cliff Drive at the back. And on the rooftop, you'd get a view of the river and downtown. So we, again, just purely on a very conceptual level, we looked at squeezing a lot of things into that footprint, into that landscape, while preserving the historic character of the building. Certainly, it wouldn't rival in total size Franklin or Phipps. But again, in our own version of what makes sense for Cincinnati, to have places where people could come in and see, attend lectures or see video about what they're going to see in Crone, to have that educational space, to have a better gift shop, since what we have now is just working with the space we had, to do a lot of those same things, though on a smaller scale. Pat, did you have those?
Yeah, I've got that. Yeah, you've got about 17 acres at Crone. The Franklin Conservatory is 98 acres. So, you know, the Phipps in Pittsburgh is 20 acres. So it's not that much bigger, but their building is, 3 times your size. The horticulture space is about 20 times your size. And they also, you've got about 275,000 visitors. They're getting 500 and 400,000 visitors per year, but they've got a lot more offerings at those facilities, a lot more educational opportunities, the restaurant opportunities, banquets, those kind of things that really bring a lot of people in.
Thank you.
Curious as to the cost of entry to those two versus Crone.
Let's see. General admission, yours is $7. Theirs are both $19 and $19.95.
What's the length of stay, Pat? Because I think that's important too.
Length of stay, yeah, yours is 45 minutes on average, and theirs is 2.5 to 3 hours. Plus, there's more to see, more to do.
I certainly appreciate everybody's curiosity about the Crone Conservatory, and I was so pleased that when we created the scope of this project, the infrastructure study, that we completed it, because it is something that I think is a strategic conversation that we should have, something that is appropriate for us to dig into with our strategic plan that we intend to look at. For the purposes of a deep dive today, or for questions today, I think what is the most pressing component of this infrastructure study is as it relates to the assets that we own. That's the conversations that we've been having. When we had the preliminary reports, we were able to incorporate that information into our capital budget planning that we did at the end of last year. It is the document that we're going to go back to have strategic conversations about which assets to in fact repair, replace, or discontinue within our organization. Again, I am very happy that we included the Crone infrastructure site, because it took a 25-year-old plan and just said, hey, what are we really talking about in terms of dollars? Gives us a good starting platform to have that discussion. I think it's appropriate for us to continue that discussion when we get into strategic planning. And at this moment, the greatest value that we got out of the infrastructure is to continue our conversation about the specific assets within our system.
Well, thank you, Kara, and I commend you for that, because I really appreciate that perspective. I know that as we look at the report and as we've had discussion today, everybody's excited about the new stuff or the exciting things, which I think the addition to Crone and the updating of Crone is extremely exciting, and I think will be long-term a benefit for us. But to your point, everybody likes to focus on the fun stuff or the cool stuff. Same way looking at the theoretical 2007 master plan. But again, as you said, I appreciate your focus because we have over $70 million of identified potential costs to repair assets we own today. So I think that's clearly got to continue to be at everybody's forefront, or 2, 3, 4 years from now, we'll be back at the same place we are today, but even in a bigger hole because of inflation. So I appreciate that. Perhaps you could then say, what's the next steps? You know, we've gotten this report. We now know, like we did 4 years ago, that we had over 60, close to $70 million. What are we going to do with this plan, and what's the next steps?
Yeah, thank you for that question. From our perspective, from staff, we have some immediate next steps, and then we have some longer term next steps. So the immediate next steps are going to unfold over the next 2 months. That's coming back together with staff's input, with commissioner input, to determine how we are going to expend the resources that we have available. As of this moment, we do not know what the subtotal of those resources is going to be. That's going to be dollars coming into our capital budget. That's going to be the potential for any of the dollars from the ARP funding, the internal review into the availability of funds that are at the discretion of the commissioners, and to sit down with this infrastructure study, to sit down with the proposals that we put together for the capital budget, and over the next 2 months, have that conversation about how to spend the resources that are currently within our control. A longer term next step would be, and by longer term, I mean in the next couple of months, in accordance with the goals that we agreed to last month, to set forward a plan to engage in a strategic plan and then actually execute it. Looking right now to have a 3-year strategic plan executed no later than the end of this year, to spend a couple of months, hopefully to get a draft in front of this commission by September. Just give ourselves a little bit of room to have some serious conversations about it. That would then look long-term into how do we utilize this infrastructure study? How do we utilize future financial resources to make those decisions on how we are going to prioritize current needs, project ideas, and even a strategic conversation about the Crone Conservatory. But there is, so for me, there are short-term action items that need to happen, which will happen over the next couple of months as we begin to finalize our FY22 budget. And then over the remainder of the year is to get to a final product in a 3-year strategic plan so that we know collectively as an organization what our priorities are, using this infrastructure study to directly inform those decisions.
I just would like to add one thing to your statement. I think also here and now, this study needs to be in, how do we get it to council? I mean, not the business manager's office, yes, but to council, because they're the ones that are going to approve our final budget per se, right? And this gives them the reason, as opposed to just pie in the sky that we've been talking about before, that we had all these needs, wants, and so forth. This proves it. And so we've got to get it in front of them. And I know they won't read it, but at least it's there.
Yeah,
I do think that it's a process of education. And I know that when we submitted the capital budget this year, I know we alluded to this study being done. As you saw copies, I did write a letter to each of the council people where I specifically identified that we had near completion of this project, which identified 70-some million of potential need over the next few years, of which 14 million was in poor condition, meaning we got to do something now on those items. So I think continually bringing this up before them. I
And telling
agree
them
with
what
you.
page.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I would suggest somehow we do a transmittal to the city council as well as the city manager and mayor's office. I'll leave that up to you to craft that. But then I think we do take any opportunity that we have when we see council people or opportunities to speak. I think we do need to keep reinforcing that we do, as you said, have proof. We've got, I think the report that was done, I think we've said this before, it was an incredible report as far as detail, the pictures, hard evidence, so to speak, as well as a vision for what it's going to take. So I appreciate the work that was done on the report.
Mr. Chair, I agree with all of the comments. I think it absolutely has to go to council, go to the city manager's office, so they understand exactly what it is we're talking about and why we're asking for what we're asking for. I think it's going to be extremely important to put it in a format that they will read. Because we can't give them a whole bunch of stuff and say, oh, we got all these things. We have to be clear about what we see as the priorities. So we've got a list of fair and poor. So we can't just dump all of that on anyone, I don't think. I think we have to be clear about and consistent in our conversations about here's what needs to happen and why, and here's how much it's going to cost. And that's why we're in front of you making these requests. So I think it's going to take some work to focus the data that we've got, because it's just overwhelming. And the easiest thing for people to do is just not do anything. So I think we have to do some work has to be done in order to get it to a place where people can digest it and then they can act on it.
I agree. We spoke about this a couple of days ago, but it is totally overwhelming to get a 200-page report, even for us, our commissioners. Now, what do we do with this? What Kara and I talked a bit about was developing the next 3-year plan that uses this $74 million report. And there are going to be some things that we say we're not going to do. We're not going to do them. They're not priority 1, 2, and 3, so we're setting these aside for the future. We may move some facilities or infrastructure to dormant status. And how the question, I think, is how do we or how do you or your staff prioritize 1, 2, and 3? There will be some obvious components in the report, but I think there will be some work to do, obviously, in terms of community input, because we don't have all the answers. We don't live in all the neighborhoods. We don't have a full view into what people desire to use, what is out of commission. So I think there will be some community input here. And I agree that putting it in a format where we're not throwing up a flag to city council to say we've got big problems, we need money, but we're specifically going to them with a request for dollars for certain uses, and that we've got community support around those already. I don't think we should go down the path at the moment for thinking about we've got these funds and here's what we're going to do. Let's not think about the funds yet. I understand that we've got limitations based on the sources of revenue, but let's let that allow us to work toward council approval for funding, or allow us to approach the foundation for a plan to raise some money for something that's got a lot of community support. So let's not allow ourselves right now to be kind of strangled by our resources. We'll get there. We'll get strangled by our resources, but let's focus on what we really need to accomplish 1, 2, and 3. And I guess that's another question. Priorities 1, 2, and 3. What time frame do you put on a priority 1, 2, and 3? Is it priority 1s are the next 18 months to be executed? I don't have the answer to that question, but I think it's important to understand timeline associated with this. And then I would just ask you, Kira, given this input, when can we expect more from you and the staff for our input?
Sure. Thank you for all of that input. I think I'd like to acknowledge maybe some steps that we've taken. So I don't believe that we are at ground zero today. Commissioner Getz and I appeared in front of the Budget and Finance Committee several months ago. At that time, they received an executive summary of this report. They also received some information from distilled information from us about those resources. They got to see some of the photos. They got the real high picture. We did that in order to support the FY22 and the FY23 budgets that we submitted, because there were items in there in poor and fair condition. So I don't think we're necessarily starting from ground zero. They know this exists. They've heard about it. They've had some familiarity that this is out there. What I think that we can do in the immediate, now that we do have the final project and final product, is work with the tools that we've been given to continue to work towards making sure that the executive summary is effective, including the components of the plan that we may have cited in the FY22 and FY23 budget that we created. But then as we collectively begin to work through the strategic plan, I think our tools become more and more refined, more and more targeted, and more effective when we continue to go in front of council. So, they are currently working on FY23, and although we have submitted a biannual budget, before we know it, we're going to be back in front of them demonstrating our support for FY23. So, timeline. I would like to get this final report to them as soon as possible. So reviewing the executive summary as it exists, maybe sending them both a link to the 200 pages, but also a 10-page succinct document showing them how it directly relates to the capital budget that we've submitted already. We then, we could do that within the next week or two. I mean, really, it's already created. We would just have to create a visual, something visually, but all that information is out there. So I would say within the next week, even, we could get that to council in that format. And then as we begin those discussions about the strategic plan, and part of our discussion about the strategic plan is going to need to be, how are we collaborating with the Budget and Finance Office? How are we collaborating with our city council members to have a discussion about funding that vast, large thing? And for us to, rather than say 74 million, maybe we say 60 million, because we've done the work, we've done the hard work and looked at each asset, and our request becomes more defined.
I would encourage us to move a little more slowly to make sure we get this.
Okay.
Because handing a council member a big report, even with an executive summary that says 74 million gets 20, these aren't the stories that, we have to make these council people care about what this is. They're getting a lot of requests to care about a lot of things in the city. And I think we've got to be able to paint some stories about, very clear stories about how investments in specific projects and in the parks in general help the council members achieve their agendas as council members. And I'm just afraid that a capital deferred budget report, it just isn't going to resonate. Not with so many overarching issues, but I think we really can't make a big picture about how these democratic environments that are inclusive and available to all Cincinnatians can really tell them to care and provide services.
I would appreciate if there's any further input, because I kind of feel there may be a spectrum amongst commissioners of get it to them, they need to see this, versus be very, very strategic about how you're thinking of it. Is there a preferred?
Well, I would tend to say that your first shot is your best shot. And so I think sitting back a little bit. I wouldn't rush to the 1
Okay.
week. I
Okay.
really, because to really accomplish that, you're just going to extract from what's there and send it. But I think taking a little bit more time and developing the commentary behind it, things like it touches all 52 neighborhoods, and the equity that is evident in spending in all of the neighborhoods that need their parks maintained. And so I would not commit, if I were you, to a 1 week time period. But if we could ask that within the next 30 days, perhaps before the next meeting, have spent some time developing a communication piece, I think that would be better. I just throw that out.
Has been, just developing over the last year. This stuff has been growing for a long time. So I would agree. The deferred maintenance is over decades and decades, and the report itself, which is incredibly comprehensive and detailed, took a long time. So let's not jam it, short time frame. I think we do have time, over the course of this report development, the deferred maintenance coming up, and this is going to be a big ask. And the other thing that I would just raise is something that we're going to have to really deal with is we're going to have a strategic plan, midterm, short-term strategic plan. We've got limited dollars. So how are we going to focus those limited dollars towards a strategic plan? But then the other thing, just in my relatively short tenure here, is all the new things that come on the plate from out of left field or right field or center field or wherever. And then how are we going to then prioritize, what the necessary but boring stuff is versus maybe the new exciting things that kind of are thrust upon us, and maybe obviously it's going to compete for those dollars. So don't have an answer, but it's just something I think we need to be thinking about as priority. How are we going to, kind of figure that out, on the fly?
I'm just a little frustrated here. I hear you, Molly, but on the other side of the fence, there is money to be spent, and we have to get on with spending it. That PNC bank account just drives me crazy. Those millions sitting there idle just drives me personally crazy. And so I really feel that although I hear you and I agree with you, I also want us to be moving forward on spending the money that we do have. So that, again, council doesn't look, well, look, we gave you this in capital last year and you still haven't spent it. So why do you need more? I mean, we have got to get on with it. And so when you say you're going to have a list of the projects first and foremost, I want to see that within a week's time, more so than all the other stuff.
I agree.
Okay, I got that itch scratched.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
and I think there are valid points on both sides, but not the but and I think at least for me, the most important thing is, what are the priorities in terms of what needs to be done? If we're clear about that, then we can talk about where the money comes from to get it done. And as Susie says, if we got money that we can spend money on things we've decided are important to get done. And then if there are other things that are important to get done that we don't have the money for, that's when we have to put together the compelling story that makes people want to join us in getting that done. And the shiny projects or the easier ones to sell, it's these maintenance things that are important to do that nobody wants to hear about. So we got to put together a story around those that makes them important for people to engage with. So I think that the important thing is, what do we need? What are the priorities? And how do we spend the money we've got already to start addressing those? And then how do we create the story around the ones we don't have the money for yet? to engage with people to make that happen.
Well, and don't forget, you've done some of this work already. We've done some of this work already. When we produced the FY 22, FY 23 capital budget, we included about 20 of the poor and fair conditions. So when we had access to the draft of this document, we did collaboratively look at the low-hanging fruit. What should we prioritize? That's an easy conversation when you're kind of working in the abstract. What's going to be in front of us in the next 2 months is when we actually understand what our current resources are. What are those dollars that are getting allocated? We're gonna have to return to that conversation. And we can have that, at that moment, we can have that conversation of, did the conversations we had in November, December of last year still make sense today in terms of prioritization? And that's what I'd like to do with you over the next couple of meetings, is to make sure our priorities still the same as they were for picking at the poor and fair conditions the end of last year, and coming up with a plan to address those with the not only the current resources that we're going to have come July 1, but the long-term need for additional resources to tackle what we prioritize.
You know, I think one of the key issues here, though, is that's how we've always done it. And getting the $1 million of capital every year as part of a fiscal budget from the city, you can see, as I said, before I came on the board, we had publicly said we had a $68 million maintenance shortfall. There were different words used as deferred maintenance, which I agree it's not all deferred, but it's maintenance that will need to be done over the next several years. Doing what we've been doing doesn't work, because all that's happened is that we are now from 68 million now to a $73 million. And I would just challenge us that the answer is not waiting till the next fiscal year budget, unless we really have a compelling argument to city council to say, this isn't working, business as usual. We need to address this, which in my mind comes to creative thinking on a sustainable source, a dedicated source of funding that's got to come to the parks to be able to catch up.
Well, let me say this, and then you tell me if I'm on the right track. What we want to do is utilize our efforts, our immediate efforts, to attempt to influence the council's decision-making for FY 22. That's what's going to be on their plate over the next 6 months. I think the 30-day timeline takes us approximately to council member deliberations. Mr. Chairman, do you have on the top of your head when the council deliberations are for?
Well, they will be getting a budget here within the next couple of weeks, and it has to be approved by the end of June. So I agree with you that whatever we can do in the next X number of weeks to influence that budget, great. But I think we start now thinking about long-term, how do we develop this message?
Happy to do that. Happy to do that. Just to ensure clarity on expected deliverables, we could spend one more minute on that. Within the next 30 days, and maybe somewhere more between that week and 30 days, maybe within the next several weeks, for our team to create a compelling document that succinctly summarizes and puts some spotlight on the important elements of this infrastructure study, probably for the purposes of supporting the capital budget request that we submitted, which was double the amount that we've ever gotten. And then that would be the immediate deliverable. And then working with you as the commissioners then to begin to dig in on the overall need, and we as staff would present a recommendation for how to prioritize, and then we could engage in those conversations collaboratively over the next 2 months to get to the start of FY 22 with a plan.
Yes, when are you presenting the commissioner's budget for 22?
I think we had discussed beginning conversations next month.
Okay,
It'll give us a span of time to, get in front of you immediately, kind of staff ideas next month for your critiques, criticisms, additions. And then that would allow us to refine and bring the commissioner's request back in July.
And that's going to spin down that cotton picking several
That's the
million.
plan. That's the plan, Susie.
Thank you.
And the priorities will be comprised of both the infrastructure studies as well as the projects on our plate.
Yeah, I think for, and this is for us to determine collaboratively, but I think at any given moment, you're going to have all of those ugly maintenance needs. You're going to have transformational projects that are kind of homegrown within our organization. And then to create a long-term strategy for how do we approach ideas that come from outside of this organization. All right, I feel comfortable with
good.
that. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, we'll move on. We have agenda item on Parks Foundation grant. Craig or Garrett, you want to set this up?
I am, as a women's committee member, I am happy to let Craig present this to you today.
Good morning, Commissioners. The Cincinnati Parks Foundation will be completing its Women's Committee membership drive June 1st, 2021. The final list of members will need to be inscribed within the Women's Committee Garden at Snellwood Park. The staff requests the board approve the application and acceptance of the grant made to the Cincinnati Parks Foundation with an amount up to $30,000.
Great. Any questions for Craig? If not, do we have a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion to accept the staff's recommendation to accept the $30,000. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner North. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? That is passed unanimously, Craig. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great.
President Getz, may I make one comment on that?
You certainly can.
It's kind of a selfish comment, and but again, as a women's committee member, thank you so much for approving that. I want to congratulate the Cincinnati Parks Foundation on a very successful drive. And one of the things that they are doing right now is saying they're encouraging people to purchase women's committee memberships for their mothers as well. That is something that I did for my mother at Christmas time. And so selfishly, I am thrilled that my name will be etched next to hers. Also something that'll be there forever, and it'll just be an incredibly special moment. And then something I'm not sure if this committee is or if the park commissioners are aware of. It is an incredibly humbling moment, but on that wall, the Women's Committee voted unanimously that under my name, it's going to say First Woman Park Director. And it's just incredibly special. So your vote today will enshrine that, and it's an incredibly special honor that means a lot to me. So.
Well, congratulations, and also I appreciate your time that you give for participating in the foundations, especially the women's committees.
Thank you.
There's no other new business. We'll move to our old business, and the first is an investment committee report, and I guess that lands on my desk. Just a brief update on the activities of the investment committee. Most importantly, I think you all recall that the park board approved engaging a law firm to come in and review our endowment funds. And the law firm of Graff Coyne, in conjunction with the city solicitor's office, was engaged. We have spent over the past several months meetings with them, sharing of information, and I'm thrilled to say that they have come back to us with a succinct write-up on each of our endowments. They've helped answer a lot of questions and just some cleanup issues that we had with the endowments. So what the endowment committee wanted to do as one of our legacies of this committee is to have things in writing, cleaned up, spelled out specifically so that Craig and future CFOs and future board members have a guide towards what exactly we have in our endowment funds and the nature of them. I think you'll see attached to some information that I provided was some specific items that we need to engage with these endowment funds, some more important than others. But I think if we attack each of those individual findings, I think we'll get a really cleaned up endowment portfolio for us. And then just as a reminder, we've got some incredibly dedicated members of our endowment committee. So former Park Commissioner Kevin Flynn has continued to help serve on that committee, as well as John Nyer, Steve Pullman from the YMCA, and then obviously Craig and I participate on that committee as well. We have been meeting on a monthly basis. We review the performance of the portfolio, and we specifically look at the performance of the individual managers who have pieces of that endowment. And then we call in the managers, we sit with them face to face and discuss how they're doing and give them recommendations as far as meeting our expectations or how they stack up compared to the other managers. So I feel very good about the attention that's being given. And as you'll recall, prior to this committee, we were spending over $50,000 a year for Mercer, a third party, to do that work for us. So I appreciate the work that the volunteers on this committee are doing. And then you'll also see that we have taken a look at our portfolios, and you will see in the reports that we have been given as far as the monthly reports that we are the beneficiaries of a great market condition that we're in. You'll see that our endowment funds have grown significantly. For those that may not know, that's not money readily available that we can spend every penny of, but the earnings that are generated by those endowments are funds that we have to be able to put to use as a park board. So the reports that you've got attached today will show the growth in those funds. The other thing that Craig has helped us do is take some of this commissioner's fund that also continues to grow, but rather than sitting in a money market account or in a checking account, is earning a little bit more money than what it had in the past. The only recommendation and perhaps action item that we can have today was some of our funds, we are not the trustee, as you're all aware of. Those are managed, our trustees are the Fifth Third Bank. Those are for tax purposes deemed to be private foundations. And according to tax rules, they need to distribute 5% of those funds. So we're locked in, and we will be receiving 5% of those funds in the coming year. So as Craig's putting together a commissioner's fund budget for 2022, this board then has the responsibility to declare how much of a distribution we want out of the fund, where we as a park board are the trustee as well as the beneficiary. So the committee looked at, again, what our recommendation is to the board as far as taking dividends. Even though the earnings have grown significantly in these endowment funds, we are making a recommendation to the board that for budgetary purposes, for developing a budget, that we do what we did last year and declare a 2% distribution from the endowment funds for budgetary purposes for next year. just to give you an idea, that would generate for us $613,000 of distributions from our endowment fund towards fiscal year 2022 budget. For 2021, that was a number, a comparable number was $531,000. So you can see that a 2% will give us growth for budget purposes, but then it also leads for an opportunity for this board, if we have other projects or other things that we are looking for funding, we can then go back. Our spending policy that we've established is up to 5%. So it gives us the opportunity, if we have specific funding needs that we want to find funding for, we can declare additional distributions going forward. But for budgetary purposes, the committee recommends a 5%, a 2% distribution. So that's a lot of brief talking about information that we've provided to you. Any questions related to the investment committee or what we're proposing here?
I don't have any questions, but I would like to commend you.
Yes.
You know, you have done a yeoman's job to dig into this pile of whatever and organize it, really get down to the bedrock of what's what and get it organized. And I know that is better you than me. There's no way I'd be able to do that. I wanted to. So really thank you for getting us to this point and, you know, really having good documentation and understanding going forward so that whoever follows in our footsteps won't have to do that. So thank you.
Thank you. And I also want to give kudos to Commissioner Flynn, former Park Board Commissioner Flynn. He has been a driving force as well. And Craig's been a great help in pulling documents together and providing information to the law firm.
Thank you, Jim. Oh, please go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, thank you also, because I think it was your suggestion and your leadership that led to the establishment of the financial committee to begin with. And I think that's been very valuable to us. I think, as I recall, when I came on, it was an automatic, we were gonna take 5%. I think we were just there at 5%. And then we were deciding to put some back because that didn't make sense. So to have strategic reasons why and logical reasons why we're doing what we're doing to generate the kinds of funds we need to have, I think is a testament to your commitment to digging into this.
Thank you.
And working through it.
Thank you.
So
I do want to say, Commissioner Anning, there was an investment committee before us.
Okay.
I did help with all of us being new. Some of us being new. We did establish a new committee and built a new committee, but I appreciate your
Great.
comments.
I was not aware of that. Thank you.
So I'm still learning. Okay, so I have a couple of questions.
Sure, yeah.
I'm still, working on putting together what we have available to us. So Susie, when you were talking about the $7 million PNC account, that's the commissioner funds available here, the 7.7 million, which has grown from 7 million to 6 million.
That's correct.
So when we say this funds are available to us, this is outside of these trusts, endowments. We could spend that today if we said.
That's correct. And just so you know, the Commissioner's Fund, one of the primary sources of revenue and the growth in that fund, that is what housed all the distributions from the endowments over the years. So as we declare a distribution today, that goes out of these invested funds into the Commissioner's Fund that we have control of here.
Okay. So when you say we're going to get $600,000 this year from the endowment, is that the collective distribution from these trusts?
That's correct.
Okay.
And that 600,000 is from this. For further clarity, and excuse me for going in detail, but there are also additional revenues that come into the Commissioner's Fund that Craig will tell us about, but other income goes into the Commissioner's Fund.
Okay. And the 600,000, is that the unrestricted component? Because I understand that several of these have restricted uses and those are being paid for, the 600 is what's left.
No, 600 is both of restricted and unrestricted. So when Craig presents, you will see that 600,000, some of that is strictly restricted to certain parks.
What's the split, like, roughly?
It's probably gonna be 9, 10, or 8, 20 around there, 8% unrestricted.
Okay. Okay. And then one final question, the Fleischman component, I saw, first of all, this write-up is really good. I mean,
Thank you.
this is gonna be in the, you know, priority files for park board understanding. The Fleischman, I saw that several years ago, the courts approved, an unrestricted use. Is that the $800,000 account? That's what's been split into two?
No, there's two Fleischman accounts, and Fleischman gets very confusing because it was the same family with two gifts to the park board. And Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, the Fleischman Gardens Fund was the 1925 gift, which is the bigger one. Thank you, which is the bigger amount. So on here, when you see two Fleischmans, and I think I see the report you're looking at, the 800,000 is the 1948, the smaller one, which is the one that was ruled upon by the probate court back in 2000. So that one is theoretically unrestricted. And the greater of the two was a 1925 gift. And technically that is today restricted, but we have been treating it as unrestricted because of that probate court ruling. So we need to go in and do some cleanup there.
So we view that ruling to cover both
Yes.
funds, and it's really specific to the one.
Yeah.
And just to follow up on Molly's comment, the 600,000 is the 2%. Is that combining the 2% and the 5% distribution?
The latter, that is the
Okay.
2 and the 5.
And that goes into the commissioner's fund,
Yes,
which continues to grow the fund that we're talking about. We have control over, we can decide how we spend.
We
it.
could spend that overnight if we wanted to.
if we wanted to. Now, obviously, there's things we keep into consideration because we do rely on the commissioner's fund to fund some parts of operation
Yes,
that we have shortfalls. So we all are aware of that. So we do.
sure.
And some of that commissioner's fund, $7 million, is partly made up of the restricted amount that has come out of the endowments. So some of that
Is earmarked.
is earmarked. That's a good way to say it. It's restricted for use for a certain thing. So as we sit here today, theoretically, unless we spent a lot of money on a few parks, we wouldn't spend the full 7.7 million. But there is well over an unrestricted, we're talking well over $2 million sitting there of unrestricted accumulated in the commissioner's fund.
So as we are thinking about things we need to do,
Yes,
that is a source of funding for
absolutely.
those things we consider to be priorities.
Yes. And quite honestly, the investment committee, because of, and I think I've mentioned this to you, because of the market conditions as they are today, we talked about, is it prudent to take more out of those funds to protect those funds? But we really are stressing in the committee, based on what we feel is guidance from the board, that until that money is ready to be put to use, there's no need pulling it out of and trying to play the market, so to speak.
Please don't take it out unless you're gonna spend it.
Yeah,
Let's get spending. Let's get spending. I'm with you, Susie. Catching up. Okay, takes me a little while.
So Jim, you said of the 7.7, a bit over 2 million is unrestricted.
Well,
Not even that is really free to be spent, is my, I understand it, because it doesn't need to be kept, it pays some salaries, it doesn't need to be kept to to
The seven-
cover a shortfall of some other nature.
That's correct. And we can get into this more when we talk about the budget, but of that 7 million, some of it has already been identified as expenditures for 2021. The fact that it's grown is for two reasons. Number one, yes, the piece of it that's been invested has generated over $400,000 just this year of earnings on commissioner funds that have not been spent. But then number two, it says that monies that we had identified to be spent have not been spent to date. So there's a couple reasons why that fund continues to grow.
Have you considered having some policy about the percentage of that funding that we would target to spend each year? So that we know we keep some, certainly for various applications that you talked about. But have you kind of thought about a strategy of, here's this fund, of these funds that are available. We want to spend whatever percentage of those against projects, against these things that we've determined to be priorities. And just have that as a principle.
Yeah, I think my gut reaction would be to do it the opposite way, is establish, okay, how much do we need to maintain in the commissioner's fund to cover that?
Yes.
But just as you think about it, money is coming in there every year, unless we have a year where we have no growth or no earnings. But we do have accumulated earnings in there that we can take.
Yeah.
But your point is well taken, and we can work with Craig, and I think this will become clearer when we look at the 2022 commissioner's budget, because you'll see in there in a given year how much of that money is going back towards operations.
And it is a practice that we are already beginning / defining, is to establish recommended reserves for individual accounts. So in the monthly documents we have those for the city's restricted amounts. It would make absolute sense to continue that over into the commissioner funds.
And you may be regret having mentioned that, but I would point out that in the report today that we have in the packet related to the restricted funds, we have significantly increased the percent that we are deeming as needed to keep as a buffer. The city's guidelines is they try and hit a 10%. They like to keep a 10% buffer in the restricted funds. What I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, in the reports that we have today, the reserves required were park staff's recommendation to keep a full 1 year of potential expenditures in reserve. And I would challenge that.
What are the potential expenditures? The historic ones that
Historic
we contributed
expenditures.
to fill the gap on operations.
Yeah, and we're talking here more on the restricted funds, like the 323 account, the 329, 318 accounts, which are revenue accounts sitting at the city as restricted funds that we do draw upon on an annual basis. But again, just as the commissioner's fund, those restricted funds receive revenues every year. So the concept of keeping a full year reserve in those, I think, might be too conservative, coming from a financial guy, too conservative a mindset, just in my opinion.
More than happy to have those conversations. That goes to potentially creating more available resources.
Okay, any other questions? If not, I will make a motion that the board approve for fiscal year 2022 budgeting purposes, a 2% distribution from the commissioner controlled distribution endowment accounts.
Well said.
Wow.
Did you follow that?
So moved.
That's your motion.
That was my motion, so
So you're second.
we'll take Commissioner Castellini's as a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, those opposed? Okay, that motion is unanimously passed.
So Jim,
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if this is appropriate, But I would like to motion for a 3-minute
Absolutely.
break. We shouldn't have to put ourselves.
We are adjourned for 3 minutes and 5 minutes.
It's enough punishment.
You see, I made you wait till after my report.
Commissioner Getz, do we want to do anything with the recommendations that you made today?
No.
Okay. I would.
I think we would, what,
But you know what my concern is?
what's your,
When these reports go forward, I mean, it's public, these are public documents, and the council,
we're live streaming.
are we still listening?
Yes.
We are
Okay. Never mind.
probably outside of the bounds of conversations we're allowed to have.
Oh, thank you. This is not.
We are. She had
Is that these people with $7 million.
You see what I'm saying?
So what do we do? So let's give it to the people that have to. That's why I keep screaming.
Everything's crazy cost.
Oh, it was such an honor. You know, the 200-year history. Yeah.
Like for instance, this,
Well, it is incredibly special because
you know, it's
the whole point of that women's community garden is that
with
everybody is equal.
if you're
So
Okay. We will be back live. So what is our next item? Monthly capital project updates. Kara?
So we've included these in the agenda, and if you like them, we'll intend to continue as picking several of our current capital projects that we know are either important to the commissioners, are popular within public realm, or have some significant updates. So for this month's meeting, we've selected the Riverfront Marina, the boat dock, the Smale extension on lot 23 and the Tom Jones Commons. And we will go through those projects. Ms. Jenny Mobley, our Deputy Director, will begin by talking about the Riverfront Marina.
We do have a very brief update with Riverfront Marina. The RFP is in the hands of the city manager for review. And as soon as that process is completed, it will be posted.
Timeline?
I know that the city manager requested, it got sent on Tuesday for review. She requested a few days to review it. And as long as everything is going the way we think, then it will be posted after that review.
And that will
I
be
can't predict everything.
open, what, 60 days? How long is that?
It is for 1 month.
1 month, okay.
That's correct.
Jenny, can you review what has occurred since the last time the board spoke about this? So the last time we spoke as a board, you were informed we had decided to alter course from a direct award to, at that time, it was an RFP. Can you talk about what has transpired over the past 5 months?
Sure. So we are moving forward. Our original submission was for an RFQ in order to obtain a variety of concepts that may come in. And with that RFQ, there was not a need for any DEI goals at that point until it went to the RFP process. It was turned in as an RFQ, and then purchasing and the city manager reviewed it and came back to us and requested that it just goes directly to an RFP. So once we received that back, we had to make some revisions in order to make sure it was an official RFP and also set DEI goals as well as prevailing wages. Some of the challenges with that were determining what items should be within those DEI goals. And so we had a overall meeting with purchasing, DEI, and the city manager's office to discuss which items should be included in those DEI goals without knowing the full concept that may come back to us. So once that was determined, we were able to complete the RFP, which we did, and submitted that back to purchasing, who has just made some minor adjustments to maybe the wording or anything like that, and now has sent it to the city manager for review.
And the last conversation that I had with the assistant city manager, Kelly Carr, was just yesterday. I apologize, it may have been the day before, confirming that it was in the city manager's hands. I did offer that as they're doing their final consideration, that we are available to answer any questions. And at that time, she indicated to me that she didn't expect there to be any conflict with proceeding forward, but she knows, Ms. Carr knows that we are readily available should the city manager have any questions.
Comments, questions?
A question I have is on DEI. I noticed on some of the other reports or projects that contracts were, or some were rejected because they didn't qualify and then resubmitted. I don't know what that does to the time frame. This has kind of been stretched out already. Is there a way that we can make sure that whoever submits the proposal, that's determined up front, that or somehow to not get it kicked out
construction aspect of this project. And those goals are released within the RFP. So the person that is submitting the proposal,
They know they've
They
got to fill
know
that
that-
out. They've got to
that's
fill that.
correct.
So did that not happen with, I think it was this building here and French
Mhm.
Park? Also,
Was
did
it
that,
Tom Jones?
was it Tom Jones?
No, it was
It was
the
this building
painting of this
and-
building in French
and
Park.
French Park, right? And-
It was denied and then had to go back out for
Right.
contract.
So that's where I think I'm gonna ask Steve to back up on those because I am not familiar with those reasons why they had to go back out on those particular projects.
Yeah, did you want to hear that now?
I think I think getting to the heart of your question is that we have now been faced with several scenarios where we've advanced in the process only to have to really revert back and repeat a portion of that process over. And in some cases, it's been twice. This is a great concern to me, to us as a team, and we know it's a concern to you as well. What Jenny just presented to us has many city partners. So we are partners with City Purchasing Office, we are partners with City DEI, and we are partners with the City Manager's Office. And I have been in active conversations over the last month or so with the representatives of those agencies. So Bobby Hageman, who is the Director of Purchasing, and Jennifer McKenzie, who is the Director of DEI. Also Kelly Carr included, who has been just recently named as our Assistant City Manager representing the city manager. All of us are in agreement that things need to work more smoothly for the relationship between us and parks. One of the things that I have mentioned to them that we intend to do in the short term is to critically evaluate where we are. Using some of these projects as case studies, but to critically evaluate what is the status of our relationship, what is the status, or how using the projects as case studies, what were the critical points of error, what were the critical points of conflict, and what are the critical points that can be improved. We have not yet dug into those conversations, but I do know that I have willing partners with those women to have active conversations so that these processes don't continue. And if for some reason there is a delay in the future, it's for a very, very good reason and not something that we could have potentially prevented. I'm not sure what the outcome of those conversations will be. As I said, they have not yet truly begun. But you know, where we are at with this project specifically is I am very pleased. And again, the last conversation I had with Ms. Carr just kind of represented that she's unaware of any remaining concerns, is that this project is now on track to go out to bid and come back and continue to move forward. Outside of this project, again, using this project as a case study, is to ensure that we have effective relationships proceeding forward.
And I would add for this project too, and I think we all recognize, there's issues on both sides. You know, it's not just a DEA issue. It's not just a rejection of things submitted to procurement. We as a board approved this project. We approved a contract. And then when we, at the last minute, after we all approved it, sent it to purchasing and said, okay, now just sign it, do it. So we know that that's got to be improved. But then procurement said, no, this has to go out to bid. Well, it was the park board, it was our side that said, rather than going out with an RFP, we want to go out with an RFQ, which just delayed the whole process. And where did we end up finally? We ended up with them saying, no, you're right, it should just be an RFP. We could have been there 2 weeks after we approved this back then, and we're still here a year later with being delayed on this. You know, what I think, Kara, I appreciate your comments and your plan to work with them. I would like to ask that, and this, I'll take comments from my colleagues here too, but I would like to ask the administration, ask you, that within 90 days, you come back to us with not just a plan for what we're going to talk about, but come back with some concrete action items that you and the city have worked together on to improve the efficiency and the timeliness of contracting for park contracts. I open it up. Anybody else have any?
I think that's great. I think whatever can be done to streamline the process, make things turn around more quickly. Because I know Susie will be the first to chime in on this, because I'm kind of echoing her comments. When we entered into the MOU, we knew one of the sacrifices was going to be time, and we tried to build in some safety walls or firewalls or whatever, some
2 weeks.
Checks and balances, for lack of a better phrase, and 2 weeks on some things. But I don't think it's 2 weeks on everything. That's the darn problem, is one department gets 2 weeks and the other, areas. Anyway, we're here, whatever we can do. So we knew we were going to take a step back, but let's, whatever we can do to refine the process, I think everybody would like to see that happen.
So with this one, with the timing that we are estimating right now, the RFP should close the 1st of July. And then we will have the information to make a decision about moving forward. So, okay.
Then we'll go to an evaluation committee and we will look at the proposals and bring in your recommendation.
And that is done by staff. You make that choice. It's not the city's choice.
It is a variety. The evaluation committee has members from DOTE, Parks, City Manager's Office, and
Oh, it's that.
maybe Recreation. I can't remember who is exactly on that committee at this moment. Sorry.
Okay.
But yes, it's
It's that
a variety of
yeah.
different individuals throughout the city that looks at all the proposals and determines her qualifications. that
Make
they
a
have
rec-
met.
And they make a recommendation, right?
Correct.
So they will make a recommendation to the city manager. That's correct. And then once the city manager reviews, then it comes back to us. Steve, did I get that correct?
That is correct.
So do we have to do what the city manager says, or
That's the
that's just,
question.
yeah,
That's my question.
No,
you
but
don't, okay.
here's, now I have a question, which I didn't think I would have. But, so only one thing is gonna come back to us? Or if 2 or 3 are qualified, will all 3 come back to us if they've all been rubber stamped saying, yes, these are okay, these are okay, these are okay, by that committee?
So the way that we will proceed with this is that the evaluation committee will come up with the lowest and best bid. I will confirm. Steve, I get that correct?
Yeah, it's what's most advantageous to the city. So the committee all scores it. It's a highly rigorous scoring process. And the result of that scoring process is the recommendation of the committee to the city manager.
Yes, but to Susie's question, we have received from the committee multiple applicants that was then our decision who to choose. Yes, it was preferred, but just like this contract that we gave to MKSK for Johnston Park, there were multiple people that qualified for that. And we had, even though there was a recommended, we had the right to choose either of the 2. Is that right?
I believe that's the case. After it's gone to the city manager approves a recommendation. I believe the board has the right then to say, we'd rather go another direction.
Well, I would step out on a limb here and just say that when these recommendations from a procurement committee, when those reports come back to the park board, I would like to see the multiple not approved, but the multiple qualified applicants or bidders that submitted for that project.
I believe,
We've
Yeah,
seen that before. We've seen
Yes.
that several times.
yes, that's what I was going to say, that when generally what we can bring back to the board is the recommended proposal, but also seeing, and we've analyzed, the committee analyzes the advantages and disadvantages of each of the other proposals, and you see the other proposals. That's correct.
And just to remind everyone, on this project specifically, we already went through that whole process before, and we had one bidder for this project. And I'll just remind you of that.
Hopefully we get at least one on this one.
Yeah. So again, I would like to request some specific action items that can improve the project. And any other questions for Jenny on the vote doc?
I do have something to add, sorry. Right, certainly. It reminded me of that, when you said qualified bidders, and not just, it obviously goes to our evaluation committee to review, but it will also go back to TEI to make sure that they have met those goals as well. So that is where that objection, if you will, or not meeting the qualifications takes place. So I didn't exactly explain that.
I assume the bidders are pretty clear that we make it pretty clear that if you don't hit this
Yes.
goal, you're booted. So don't try and skate around this or try and whatever, because that's just disqualifier. Then it's a waste of everybody's time, along with yours.
Yes. Go back to square one again.
Sure.
Yeah.
Again, yeah.
'Cause I
We
thought that
did
was-
have a bird in the hand.
Yeah.
I don't want us to forget that, so hopefully we got one later.
Mr. Thomas, yes.
No, I was just thinking that part of it is spelled out
Yes.
right up front.
Yes.
So if you don't meet that, then
Should be no question.
you're out of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that shouldn't even be under consideration if you don't cross
But
that.
it
threshold.
seems like people are ignoring it, or
Yeah.
at least, the painting crews.
Yeah.
did.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry, just to confirm deliverables, with the commissioners, within 90 days, to ensure that I do in fact continue this work with purchasing DEI in the city manager's office, to do a deep dive, into the relationship, and to produce specific action items, as well as outline, how we intend to make this process more efficient.
Perfect.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Jenny.
Jenny.
Okay, we'll move on to Smale Lot 23.
Okay, Mary has some images to share with you, and I know a number of you saw the site in person. Mary, if you want to bring up those images. And while she's doing that, the project is very close to substantial completion. Well, let me talk through it. So you can see the site in the upper left-hand corner there. Before we started, it was basically parking lots. Next image. And it's coming. At any rate, this week they should finish planting the trees, finish with the soil. The sod goes down next week. So this was the site plan. So you see the whole park, and then of course in the upper left-hand corner, lot 23 and 28 next.
That's it.
And so, what's going on here? I just see the master plan in front of me.
We see the parking lot.
We see the parking
Yeah, the
lot.
parking lot.
Oh, okay, well then I'll have to guess what you're looking at. There we go. So there's the parking lot, and Now you're going to see a shot taken probably a few weeks ago. Can we see the next one?
Yeah.
So I'm just seeing the parking lot. Maybe it'll come in soon. It's an aerial. It's sort of the same shot. There we go. So
Yeah.
obviously the music center's on the left. You see the cul-de-sac, the dead end of Race. You see that big green spot in the middle. That's the performance lawn. It's almost 2 acres. And it was,
Arts
excuse
and
me.
crafts, right?
And then we go to the next one. I'll just keep talking through. Images, pictures I took, some just yesterday and some last week. So the granite is all down. We can just keep going from the master plan into the site photos. The granite is down, the railings are in, the trees should all be planted by tomorrow. As I said, the sod goes down, which is on the south side, the river side of the performance lawn. It's pretty cleaned up. The barriers are down, the garage is about to open. And I know there have been a number of events at the music center, or at least showings. This was taken from the balcony, and some of you got to see that from the music center, looking at the tree grove. And again, this was just a few weeks ago. And the next one, and those are Kentucky coffee trees in the foreground. Seems to be a pretty good lag here, so I'm not sure what you're seeing. I'm seeing this overview.
Yeah. We're seeing the building at the moment.
Well, it's still so slow here. I think you can, Mary, you can just run through. There we go. So I'm seeing the steps in the tree grove looking to the river right now in this picture. I suspect you're ahead of me. There's the building.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, you can just keep running through.
Are the cicadas going to attack those new trees?
Well, there's disturbed, there's a concrete deck, so there's no cicadas in the ground there to do that.
But they wouldn't fly in from Smale?
I suppose they can. I'll have to consult a cicada expert for that.
They've got plenty of,
Or do you think Smale won't have many
I don't
because
think
it was
so.
all dug up?
They disturbed that, they will go back.
Yeah, there are plenty across the river.
we've sent them all over to the woods.
No, we're clean.
So long story short, as these images are taking their time to show up, the project is on budget. It's a few weeks behind schedule. It was scheduled to start to be complete May 1st. The heavy snow, the winter really it took its toll here, but we've caught up in a lot of ways to only be 2 weeks behind. So you're seeing the turf and the elevator and the music center. Just keep running through them. And really, if there are any, there's the North Tree Grove. That was being mulched as of yesterday. Probably finished that today. And you can see in this picture, they're working from west to east. So they're finishing the east side. Yeah. And I think the last two, yeah, that is where Race Street ends. And it's essentially a drop off if people are dropping somebody off for the park or to the music center. So certainly happy to answer any questions. It's been a long time getting to this point, but the project has really gone well. And I think that the people we've worked with on this, our collaborators in the music center, we've worked well together on it. The stage should be arriving within the next week, and they will be assembling the stage by using a crane from Race Street and putting the stage together.
That was my question. Where's the
There's
stage?
your answer.
Thank you. And it's gone from being a temporary stage to a permanent stage, correct?
Well, yeah, they purchased the stage. They anticipate keeping it there, so it can always come down and go back up, but that's not their intent now. So it probably stays all year, which means when there isn't an event there, that people can use the stage. We can use it for programs. And the other nice thing about it is 100% of the maintenance of the stage is on the music center.
And it's owned by the music center.
Correct.
Stage outfits, yes.
Yeah, thank you.
Any questions or comments for Steve? Steve, one comment I had in your monthly CIP write-up, you mentioned it's a $6.8 million project. 1.7 came from the state, 1.45 came from MEMI. And then you've got CIP at 3.7. The city has provided to us 2.7. So I believe that we're still $1 million short, if that's correct.
Well, I'm not sure. I might have to rely on creating a foundation for the funding because fundraising was closing the gap. That initial grant of 1.7, and the city, I believe, is proposing additional money, as you mentioned, to come into this. So I'm not sure what the gap is, or if there is a gap. And I think closing it depends on where the foundation is now in fundraising for Lot 23. And as you know, they're doing that as well as raising funds for phase 2.
And as it relates to phase 2, have you begun a process for design work for phase 2? I know that we approved a contract for Lot 28 at our last meeting, but the final designs for 23 were still up in the air. Where are we on that?
As soon as council passes the ordinance and we certify the funding, we're good to go.
Commissioners, the council is supposed to pass the ordinance to be introduced on May 26th.
And I don't know if Craig knows, I think the ordinance may have,
Man, Steve, Craig's.
I'm sorry.
The 500,000 Parks Foundation, and the 200,000 through 29 science services, phase 2 of Parks 23 and Parks 24.
Say that again. I can't hear you.
Council is going to, the ordinance going to be introduced to council on May the 25th, 26th for the phase 2 design.
And 28.
Yes. So once they pass that, go ahead and set up, transfer dollars into there. Go ahead and
We, I think we have seen, I don't think we have acted on, the question raised was Lot 28 design. I think we have seen some renderings, but I believe that the contracting that you're doing for Lot 28 is to take some of the conceptual designs and come together with a design, well, finish that, a more formal design or what?
Yeah, it basically building on the work that has been done previously including by Michael McInturf and by Sasaki. What the board approved, I think it was just at the last meeting, was entering into a contract, which is underway with MKSK, to build on that and take it all the way through construction documents.
Okay. Okay.
And additionally, for the fiscal 22 capital budget, there is a line item that the budget evaluation included with $5 million.
And have you seen that yet? Has that been submitted yet? I mean, has that been issued by the city manager yet?
It has not been issued.
Okay.
But it was inputted into the fiscal 22.
Gotcha. Any other questions on 23? Thank you, Steve. Can we move on then to town general comments?
Sure. Let's see if maybe the images can go faster there. And again, just took some pictures in the last few days, starting with the rendering.
That's a rendering. Yeah.
And as Mary's pointed up, that is on budget. I think probably the weather delayed us a little bit. The project is moving through substantial completion. Again, in a few moments here, we should be seeing some images. I don't see anything yet. Do you see anything? I'm sorry, are pictures up? Hello? Can people hear me?
I don't know if you can hear me, Steve. This is Kevin. I don't see anything.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone hears me.
I'm here too. I can't see anything either or hear anything.
Just 1 second, my computer.
Can you hear us now?
Oh, now I can hear you. We don't see anything, but I can hear you.
I couldn't see you.
The commissioners are jesting with you. This is, Mary's working on sharing the screen.
Okay.
Her computer's a little cold.
Oh,
While that is, we
Yep.
certainly listen to you as
Yeah.
we're getting these images up and can see them.
Yeah. Yeah, I just want, oh, I'm sorry, Karen. Go ahead.
Can you give us the overview while we're waiting for the
Yes,
picture?
that's what I was trying to do, and I kind of lost sound, I thought. So, yes, we're on budget. We're moving through completion. The only things not done is finished grading and landscaping. The steps look like they were just finished a few days ago. The kiosk is in. The signs, the interpretive signs, I'm going to share you some images with you in a few minutes here, are being fabricated. Operations will be putting a playscape into place, and swings are on order that should arrive in next month. And so we're looking at being finished and ready for whatever celebration is planned, at least by July. And they're nice pictures, right? There we go. So that's the rendering, you might recall. And that's what's been going into the ground. And you can just run through the pictures, Mary, if you can find them. So the overview, you see the shelter in the distance, the walkway loop, another view of it, and that was a few weeks back. And just keep going through it. Of course, it's just around the corner from where you are. You see the wetland being built in the foreground, the shelter, close up of the shelter on a leaf-shaped pad. Close up of the boardwalk. The steps that will connect the Tom Jones Commons up to Season Good, the kiosk as it was going in with the steps in the background. Another one. And I want to give credit to our staff that actually built the kiosk. Facilities built that. And that's what the signs will go on. Next. And then just real quick, without going into any detail, there's 4 images of each of the signs. So one of them, and they're big panels, they're about 8 feet wide. These are going to describe and then show on a map all the major features of Eden Park. And then there are 3 other interpretive panels. The history of the waterworks with images from the past, and 2 more. Yeah, and the history of Eden Park, and specifically on Crone and the Playhouse and the Art Museum. And then finally, the flora and fauna of the park. There you are. So that's it. And the project is looking good, and we look forward to the dedication.
Questions, comments?
I'm sure that this package was distributed when you all were considering it, but I'd love to see it forward. See what you just shared. I'd like to read through that. It's really an exciting new addition to Eden Park.
Yeah. Steve, may I ask you to forward that to Commissioner North, just all of the work that was done prior to construction to design the site.
Oh, the design plans? Yeah, I couldn't quite hear that. Sure.
Thank you.
It is great, and it's really good to be close. Are we doing anything in social media around coming soon? Because I think this is such a great thing that we want to make people aware of, even before before it's ready, so they can be excited with anticipation.
Rocky, can you tell us about your collaborative efforts with the foundation to prepare for this opening?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. Yeah, we've been working with the foundation and also with Mr. Tom Jones, and are glad to say we've got a dedication set. I was going to mention this later for July 23rd at 10 a.m. So you will all be patient to that. That was heavily dependent on Mr. Jones's travel schedule when he could be in town. And now that we have that set, very soon we'll be announcing, that is coming. And absolutely, that will start the sort of anticipation phase with our social media audience, where we can share pictures like this and begin building excitement for the project.
Right.
And that
I
was
just think,
with us
go ahead.
and the foundation, and we would want to make sure that Tom's looped in as well. He's very active on social media also.
Great. Steve?
I was asked a few weeks back to give an updated presentation to the Mount Adams Community Council. So I did that, and they're certainly looking forward to the opening.
I have to say, I'm very much looking forward to this. As you all know, Tom is a very good friend of mine, and this project was the first that I had voted on as a member of the park board. And I just would like to use this also as an example of concern about moving projects forward. I know that in 2019, we were given reports that said that bids would be done by fall of 2019 and construction would be completed in spring of 2020. Then in November of 19, we said, well, no, bids are going to be going out the first quarter of 2020, and construction would begin in spring of 2020. And then in July of 2020, we said, well, it's out to bid now, and we hope to have it completed by December of 2020. Then in January, we said the work is underway, but it'll be completed by the end of May of 2021. And then the report we have today says a completion date of 6/21. And then the paragraph below it says the completion date will be July. So I just want to continue to stress that the board is very interested in the process we go through for completing projects. And as we said at the meeting last month, when we approved a contract for renovation of this building that we had approved a year before, it's the same thing. I believe this is another example where we approve something, but then the timetable keeps going out, and each month it's a month later. So I would just encourage staff to continue to look at processes and procedures to try and be a little more efficient or timely. And I think one of the reasons for asking for these updates is just that, to make sure, because I don't see it in the reports today, we don't have a clear picture of here's what the project was when we approved it, here's the project amount, here's our estimated completion date and a status of where we are today. So I would just encourage that you look forward to processes to keep us up to date on those types of things. Any other comments or questions?
Comment and a question. I really like the panels, the interpretive panels, or the stuff with history on it. I think that's a really great idea, and it's great that you kind of incorporate the entire vicinity. So I look forward to reading about that. The question I have is regarding the wetland and the little footbridge over that. Is that basically just dependent upon Mother Nature to fill that up and just to keep it full, or is that something that we're going to actively try and keep wet? I'm just thinking about a drought in August and whether that's going to naturally just kind of dry up as it does in nature, or is it more of a man-made water feature?
It's pretty much natural. That's a natural wet area, and that's where the water drains. So we were taking advantage of that.
Okay.
One question for me, and Brad, your comment brought it to mind about the panels. I think it's great wherever we have the opportunity to do that, to inform the public about relevant history wherever they happen to be. And what it made me think of is a presentation we had maybe in last month's meeting about doing that electronically. and I can't remember.
Was Ezra Charles.
Was Ezra
with the
Charles,
QR
yeah.
code,
Yes,
right?
yes. So how can we think about, or can we think about making that applicable more broadly? So while it's great to have it on panels, I think the aesthetics of that are great. But I think from a practical thinking about how people interact with things today, if there were a QR code there that you could just pull all that up on your phone and get even more information than we would be able to put on a panel.
Well, you've struck on a chord that I know Mr. Jones is pushing with us. And in fact, there will be additional, besides those panels, there will be QR codes for things like taking you to Mount Adams Association site,
Yeah.
the Playhouse in the Park site, the Art Museum site. And he's working with Steve and the foundation on expanding that concept, just as you said. Besides being able to read it, have QR codes that sort of tie in to other content that's already out there.
Yes, that's correct. And Tom wanted, that's a great idea for people to be able to see what's at Crone right then or what's coming up at the Art Museum, and QR codes will allow people to do that.
That's great.
Yeah, and if I may just jump in as well, Commissioner Thomas, recently on my team, we gained access to a QR code maker software that is going to enhance what we'll be able to do. For example, we'll be able to have one QR code we can put multiple places, but we can change the content behind the scenes so that it could be on it could be on a static sign. Anyway, I won't get into details, but that is something we are beginning to incorporate more and more through our signage. We used it on some of the surveys we did at Denora, for example, and we'll continue to incorporate.
I think that's great because in any park, I mean, when I go to a new park, there's a history in that park. There's a reason why it has the name it has. There's a time when it started. There's a purpose it serves. So just to be able to get that information, so we teach people as they enjoy our parks, I think would be a benefit.
Well, even having park trails. So
Yes.
you scan a QR for that park and you've already got, here's the trails that go through it. Yeah, I agree with you. That's a great opportunity. Cool. Anything else on Tom Jones? Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
I'll slip in a couple here. ARP update. City Council did vote yesterday on allocating the final resources that will be provided to them. I think, as you all know, the guidance that was presented was much more restrictive than what people had hoped. So the parks are receiving $2.35 million of that funding that will replenish some of our restricted funds, such as the Crone Fund, the 329 Fund, the 318, I believe, but it restores to the restricted funds some lost revenues due to the pandemic. Beyond that 2.3 million, though, the other funding that was initially proposed by administration does not qualify for the regulations that came out. So there were initially $14.4 million proposed to come to parks for projects, and it just isn't available. As Craig mentioned, the city administration has committed that they would put forward as part of the fiscal year 2022 budget. They are hoping to include 1.5 million for towards the completion of Smale. But the other projects, I'm not sure where we stand with that. So I wanted to let you know that that's, and again, next year, the ordinances that were passed were strictly for funding that we will receive, I think, in the next few weeks, the first year funding. The city council will have to go through the same process again next year of allocating the funds that will be received as part of that ARP program next year.
Gotcha.
So I wanted everybody to have that. The only other thing I had added is if there are any questions We don't typically talk about all of the financial reports and all of the personnel staffing reports. Some are different this month, and I didn't know if anybody had any specific questions or comments.
I do, as usual.
Commissioner Norton.
You know, we talked about, we've got so much work to do, so much, and we only have so much money to do it with. But the other big component is having people that actually do the work. We still have 23 open positions. Some critical, obviously, from a planning perspective. Where are we with HR? Do we have a person in that critical role? Are these positions posted? Are we recruiting, interviewing?
Yeah, I think we had attempted to capture the current status of each of these positions. So if that's language that's familiar to us, but not translatable,
Well, particularly at the top for PBA full-time positions. This is where the senior, so this is page 91. We've still got senior architect, landscape architect, those are still open, and it just expiring early fiscal year 22, which I presume means August, September.
hopefully,
Is that what we're-
hopefully before, yes, August, yes, that's what we're hoping for. So let me attempt to answer, please let me know if I didn't come close to answering. So the reason that I asked Craig to separate these two categories is that in our mind, at this moment, at least, they are two distinct categories. The top category represents the positions that were held back in FY21 for PDA, but more than that represents the positions that we've held back for PDA for FY22. That is in relationship to the 8% reduction exercise that we were asked to complete. So until July 1 hits, we do not know if the city is going to accept that 8% reduction exercise. Our hope is that they don't, and then those become positions that we can have conversations about. That is the same conversation with the positions below that says holding. Those are a part of the just the next plan of attack going forward. So one of the, and again, Commissioner North, I apologize because I'm not sure which meetings you were present for. But one of the things we had said was we have these positions that have been PDA for FY21. We're holding them for FY22 for the budget reduction exercise. If that exercise is in fact not accepted, yes, then we want to have a conversation about what we can do with the sum total resources of those positions. So rather than just fill a position that we have open, would be to have a better conversation about where are gaps within our organization that we can use the financial resources to do an add, delete, and create new positions. So to your comment of where we at, I feel that the vast majority of these positions are in final stages.
No, let me ask plainly. I know we've talked about we need people in roles that can support the work that Steve and Cindy are doing. These are key positions that are responsible for planning and executing and project managing a significant number of projects. We've got new parks coming. We've got the Freedom Center project. I always say these are hands, not wands, right? We need people to actually do them. So are you saying the senior architect and landscape architect are not approved positions?
No, they are. Okay. They are, and they're posted.
But not until July.
But I think you said we're not sure that the city's gonna approve them to be hired. Did you say that?
No.
The 8%, what is if we have to cut 8%?
They are not included.
Which of these are these, any of these, which are positions would be at risk of not being filled?
The senior architect and the landscaper.
No, I apologize. Everything that's on there was PDA in FY22, and then we add for FY21, and then we added additional notes for those that are being held for PDA in FY22.
Okay,
The senior architect and landscape architect are not being held. Yes, they will be, I mean, we're ready to fill those. I think with the intention of the PDA fiscally, we're okay. Yeah.
Yes, so the senior architect and the landscape architect are actually posted right now. And, sorry, I can't hear me.
That's okay.
And it closes on June 6th. So as soon as that closes, they will review those applications and move forward with those.
But
So those
funding,
are in the process.
funding is not available or approved in the budget until July 1, correct?
Per the official documentation, but I know we always then look to Craig and say, you know, do our fiscal resources allow us to hire? And I think our current status would be if somebody was ready to be hired before July 1, we could afford to bring them on.
Yes, Commissioners, the intent of the report is to show open positions, but then show what was committed for PVAs this fiscal year. And like Carol was explaining, throughout the year, if you're seeing variances like open positions, those are carrying salaries that are not being spent. So obviously, if we carry an average of 15 open positions all year long, we can hire sooner a position that may have been PVA. Because it's PVA on a piece of paper, but within the CRIS system that it's an available position. That's one of the things that's deceiving, kind of deceiving about this. So it says we have 23 open positions. Well, we PVA'd say 5 of those.
so again, I'm learning simply, what does it mean to be PVA? What does PVA stand for?
We committed position vacancy allowance. We committed not to hire that position next year or due to budget reductions.
Okay, well, this is a very misleading report from that perspective, because this would tell me that we have committed to not hiring these positions that are PVA. Right?
The top ones, yes, we committed not to hire those fiscal year 21 because we said we would PVA those.
Okay.
At this
But you're
moment,
saying that we've got the resources, if we wanted to hire them in 21, we've got funding to be able to do that to some degree.
Yes, because of attrition and as you go through any organization, you're always going to have attrition. I would never expect this variance to be zero because you have individuals being hired and individuals leaving. So you always have that process of attrition and rehiring.
But then we've got this note that says that these positions were PVA'd in fiscal year 22 as part of that budget reduction exercise, which I recall. But we're saying we don't expect that to be exercised by the city.
we don't know. It is appropriate to say that at this moment, our budget submission identified these positions, and for our purposes, we are not entertaining filling those positions until we know whether or not the city is going to accept the budget reduction exercise, which those first 4 positions would then not be available to us in FY22, or if they do.
I would be very surprised, Commissioners, that we would have any reductions in the next 2 years. Now going into the 3rd year, that's going to be a different story because of the ARP funding.
So I just bring this up.
Biggest possible talent pool that we could. I think as Jenny said, it's June 6th. And next week, we will be defining what that interview process looks like, who will be involved, what the timeline is, with the intention of filling those positions as soon as possible. Depending on the candidate, I would say would be when that person would fill that position. Obviously, our timeline is as soon as possible. Some people are comfortable with a 2-week notice, and if we have a stellar candidate that requires a little bit more time, we would certainly look to make that accommodation. I would be supportive of that accommodation for the correct candidate. So the goal is to hire those positions as soon as possible and begin the interview process the day that we were able to, which would be the day after closing.
So best case scenario, you got great candidates available to jump on board. What's as soon as somebody could be sitting in a seat?
If we do an aggressive interview process, I would say no less than 30 days. Minimum of a 2-week notice that they would do, so mid-August, mid to late August.
Do you have any sense that we are being impacted by the labor shortage? Like, there are industries who are having a very difficult time hiring people. Is there any sense
I
from the
have,
city or anywhere that you can get a gauge on that for us?
I probably should have, but I did not look at the current applicant pool before this meeting. Jenny, do you know what the current status of the applicants are?
At this time, there were only, there were a lot of hits on the actual posting, but there are 2 on the senior architect, I believe, 3 applicants for the landscape architect at this time. But where we are having trouble with the hiring is in our seasonal staff. Our seasonal staff are yes, it's very difficult to find. So I'm not seeing that so much in
Okay. Well, and that was the question I had. It says full-time. Does this include our part-time seasonal staff?
No, it does not.
So how many part-time seasonal staff availability? How many staff do we have and how many are unfilled?
I need to bring that exact number to you next time.
Give me a ballpark. Where do we stand?
68 open positions, probably, yes.
Between full and part-time.
No, 68 seasonal,
Seasonal.
part-time positions.
68 out of how many guesstimate?
I would say we are probably at 50 hired out of that 68. I know.
So you're 18.
So it's 18 short.
Yes.
Oh,
yes,
oh,
yes.
that feels so.
I thought it was 68
We have
short.
numbers on our notes,
Yeah.
Sorry.
Gosh, you're gonna get
Yes,
cut.
we're working through it, but there have been multiple, many interviews, multiple offers. Some have accepted, obviously, some have not. Some have gone through the process and decided to back out on seasonal staffing, but and we've had a lot of applicants for sure, but actually getting them on board sometimes can be difficult.
Might be a little easier after the end of June.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kara, the last question I had on the staffing report. So the 17 in the bottom, to Molly's question, are we impacted at all by not having a full-time permanent director of HR working or manager of HR to fill those 17? Those
That was
17
not
positions?
silent. That was
Sitting right over here.
we absolutely,
I'll take that as a yes. So we have,
absolutely do. We absolutely do. So Jenny, as our deputy director, has been working very closely with Leslie Fletcher, who is our admin tech, as well as the time of Doris in Central HR has been dedicated towards our staffing resources. We are absolutely experiencing a crunch because of that. The internal review process is still underway. Excuse me. That is being overseen by Central HR. There was a meeting scheduled that was canceled and intended to be rescheduled here in the very near future.
Great.
So we are, they have not yet produced a recommendation.
thank you.
So,
Any other questions? Go ahead.
yeah, just for clarification, are we allowed to hire for that position or we are on hold for hiring?
We could, so any position in our organization is allowed to be double filled. We have to get permission for that. Jenny and I have had long conversations about that, and we believe that the internal review process is, as soon as the meeting occurs, we will have information that will guide us in any action steps. So, I mean, we did talk about it, but the hope is that within 1 to 2 weeks, the internal review process would be complete. To me, that's not compatible with posting and to fill that, to double fill that position.
And there's nobody in-house that you feel can do that.
So we're already accommodating, and Jenny's doing a phenomenal job. Jenny had a lot of experience with HR issues prior, so Jenny's kind of serving as in-house expert. But I know that Central HR has been giving an incredible amount of resources as well.
I have to give props to Leslie as well. She has really stepped up and is working her hardest to make sure there aren't any glitches or any delays.
Great. Any other questions on any of the reports?
How long has the job posting been out for the senior architect and landscaper?
We started May 6th. So it was out for 30 days.
And I will go in and take a look at it and look at the caliber of candidates that we have, so that rather than wait until June 6th and say we don't have quality candidates, we can take a look and adjust marketing efforts or any recruitment efforts now.
That's a great idea. Don't wait for it to be
Yeah.
all in and then say, oh geez, we don't really have anybody who want it.
And use your social media outlets, you can have far reach with this.
Yeah, Rocky, the comment, if you can't hear over the fans, is just, and I think praise for our social media efforts in reaching a large audience.
Yeah.
That's Rocky and his team.
Is there a link on our social media page for career opportunities? Like a lot of pages have that. You're just browsing around, they've got somewhere you click to see to look at career opportunities.
Did you hear that, Rocky?
Yeah, right now we have that on our website, and then we post jobs, per job when we're recruiting. But we could look into adding a jobs tab as well.
Yeah, it may be a good idea.
The best organization for always.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Okay. Well, let's move then to staff comments.
All right, thank you. And again, it is still the AM. Good morning, everyone. As you can sense, and like is happening all over the country, things are opening back up, and we're busier than ever here at Parks. It's always a busy time of year for us, and then on top of it, we've got a lot going on. I did want to mention there's been a few references to the city manager's proposed budget and the budget process. Commissioner Getz, you're absolutely right that will be adopted by the end of the month. My understanding per the last updates I've seen is we should be seeing the city manager's recommended budget sometime today. So that would tell us in terms of the operating and capital what's being recommended. So we'll keep an eye out for that and pass along any updates to you as soon as we receive them. I wanted to mention to you that we kicked off the Mayor's Corporate Challenge a couple weeks ago. It's been very successful. The team has done a fantastic job. It runs from May 7th through June 4th. There are events that are tagged as Mayor's Corporate Challenge. There's a total of 21 events. They include parks all along the riverfront, Mount Airy, Valley Park, Alms, Kennedy Heights, Crone and Eden Park, our parkways, Mount Echo, so parks all over the place. And then also, we really have to thank all the corporations. And for those that don't know, this is a big push with local corporations to sort of sign up to help us with different endeavors. And there's a few of these that I'm going to read off, but I think it's worth reading off so that you all can hear. We really want to thank Hard Rock, First Financial, Top Golf, the Sign Museum, Icron, Hormel, Taft, Stitness, and Hollister, Dewey's Pizza, Cornerstone Insurance, Mount Notre Dame High School, GE, Scherzinger, FIS Global, Steelcase, and of course, our friends and partners at the Parks Foundation. So through all of these efforts, we've had 385 volunteers get scheduled at these different events for a total of 1,540 volunteer hours. So, you know, it's, you don't really get the sense of it just sort of reading off the names, but we've certainly been promoting the efforts through our outlets. And we want to thank everybody involved for that. This was a severely stymied effort last year with the pandemic, and it's come back bigger and stronger than ever. So we really want to thank everybody involved. As you also know, Crone Conservatory has reemerged with the Butterflies of Bali. You've probably seen and heard people talk about that. That is presented by the John A. Schroth Family Charitable Trust, as well as Scherzinger Pest Control, who stepped forward in a big way for us this year, Scherzinger. And wanted to let you know that within the first 10 days, it's been very well received. Within the first 10 days, they've already had over $100,000 in revenue generated and sold over 12,000 tickets. So it's been very, and this is, keep in mind, they're scheduling tickets by appointment. So there's a limited number. So we are, and I know Mark and his team are doing wonderful. We've had 43,000 website views on the ticket page for this. So our outreach and marketing efforts have done really well, work with local media, and then also just our internal marketing tools that we have available to us with our audiences. Mark, I know, cannot wait until the in-person restrictions are limited so that we can do even better. This is going to be a long campaign for us to sustain because it goes all the way to September 6th. So we're going to be looking to do some fun things along the way to keep people interested. You may have also heard Everybody in Mount Airy kicked off this month. This is an amazing program run by the Parks Foundation in partnership with Luke 5 Adventures, where they use special all-terrain wheelchairs called Rosies, and trained volunteers who work as Sherpas that allow hikers of any ability to actually get into the wilderness in the trails and experience nature. We sort of piloted it last year, and this year it's going to run all the way from May through October, the first weekend of the month out at Mount Airy. These hikes will be taking place. And we also want to give a nod to former Park Commissioner Kevin Flynn, who's been personally involved in this, I think personally and financially involved in this program. So that is going to be going on from now to the fall. We want to thank everybody involved for that. We've mentioned some of this already, but you know, with things opening back up, we've got a lot of these projects that are coming online that are having recognitions, or there's sort of a backlog of recognitions. A few of these have been scheduled. The Kyle Plush Pavilion ribbon cutting is set for June 6th at 5 p.m. You've all received invitations to this. This is in partnership with the Stanberry Advisory Council and the Plush family, who are putting that together. As you can imagine, that's going to be a significant moment for the Plush family. So we've been working real closely with them.
Rocky, was that June 5th or June 6th?
Sorry, it's the Saturday. I believe it's June 5th. Did I say 6th?
Yeah, that's
Sorry.
good.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Commissioner Getz. It's the 5th. On June 27th at 5 p.m., the Marion Spencer statue is being dedicated by the Women's City Club. They've been leading that project. You will be receiving invites for that. That will be coming to you. And then we already talked about the Tom Jones Common project earlier. Again, that's scheduled for July 23rd at 10 a.m. And then finally, Mary, hopefully, if you could put up the image. I know this took a second, so I'll give you some time. But just to sort of conclude this conversation, as you know, the cicadas have begun to emerge all over the city. This is something we're planning to have a lot of fun with. There's already been quite a bit of interest There's already been quite a bit of interest in this from local media, from local organizations. We've got a lot of fun things planned. We've been having our naturalists talk about this, but we can't wait for the full emergence. This is a poster that we've used on social media to tease some of the videos that we've put together. And we only imagine that's going to increase over the next couple of weeks, probably from now for the next month or so. And so this was, we want to give credit to Kelly Pillar, graphic designer, who put this together in a Hitchcock horror film style. And I'll just leave you all with that, and look out. We've got some surprises in store, and we plan to have a lot of fun with, using this unique experience as a way to draw attention to the parks, to our staff, to nature, to educating people and getting people out in our parks. And we're really excited.
Great. Thank you, Rocky. Any questions for Rocky?
Yeah, I just have one question, and I don't know if you're going to be able to answer it, Rocky, but what's the lifespan of a butterfly from Bali?
Oh, it's pretty short. It's shorter than a cicada.
Okay, so somebody's hatching these things and producing them over the course of whatever it is, 5 months.
It's a really interesting process, and I think even Mark has said that they actually live longer at Crone than they live in the wild. And I've been there. It's USDA certified, correct? So there is a process for catching, handling, disposing. It's quite labor intensive. But we do it right.
Is it U.S. Critter Association, or what does this see? Right?
USDA.
DA.
Yeah, sorry.
But you
I
want,
think we should work.
Well,
you
and
want to go on a sunny day because they don't fly when it's sunny.
Oh, good note.
Yeah, so
And-
you wouldn't be able to get them there.
And the cicadas are out in Clifton already, so I know Michael George is doing group trail hiking through Burnett Woods for the cicadas, so for a good time. Okay, commissioners' comments. We've got the floor open for the good of the commission. I have none either, but again, it's been great to have everybody back together again, and look forward to continuing this. Hopefully get the public back as soon as possible. Our next meeting is June 17th. And any suggestions or requests for agenda items, please forward to Kara. We want to make sure we cover things that you all are interested in. So with that, if there's no objections, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. 11:56.
Well done.
Yes.
Under the 2 hours.
11:56. AM.
Mary, I forget, do we return these? Do you reuse these?
That's up to you.
Okay.
Leave them or take them. I've got
Hi, Susie, good luck.
Thank you.